One of the most important things we can do to better manage our time is to manage expectations that other people have of the projects that we're working on. The concept of managing expectations is that you're on the same page with your customers. This means that we should define everything that we can. If you've ever gone through the process of defining things, you know that it can be a really big project. But if you haven't defined things, you could find that when you deliver a project, the customer says, "This isn't exactly what I was asking for. I had something different in mind." Of course, you can't define every single thing, but the more you define, the closer you'll be to having the same or very similar expectations. If you haven't defined the specs very well, you'll find yourself having this conversation. Well, we could do that, but it will take X number of hours more, which means we're not going to deliver it on the date we said we were going to deliver it on, and it might cost this much more to finish the project. This is an uncomfortable conversation. It could cost your customer to lose trust in you. Some people don't even have this conversation and they say, "Well, I guess it was our mistake for not understanding. We'll just eat the cost and work harder to get it done by the deadline." When I define specifications, I like to understand what the MVP or minimum viable product, in other words, the least amount of work that I need to do to deliver a product that will actually get the job done, and define the project priorities. What are the most important things to you? I've found that sometimes I assume what the project priorities are, but having the right conversation and asking the right questions with the customer helps me understand that my assumptions are wrong. I want to make sure that I'm working towards something that we've agreed upon, what their expectations are, and what we've defined, instead of working off of what my assumptions are. So that's the concept. The key is communication. It's communication up front when we're developing the specifications, and communication with regular updates. As a manager, it's frustrating to me when I don't get regular updates from my development team. I want to understand where they're at and how they're progressing. This will help me understand if they've misunderstood the specifications or if I need to have a certain conversation with my customer. One of the most important things I want to know is the completion estimate. Are we still going to be able to deliver the project to the customer on the date that they were expecting? I don't want to find out on the day that it's due that we're running late. That makes those regular update conversations that much more important. When you're communicating, make sure that you're sharing the right information with the right party. For example, if you have a conversation with your developer and you're finding that they're having certain technical challenges, you don't need to take those issues to your customer. Your customer usually doesn't care about the technical challenges. They just want it done well and right on a certain date. If your customer's having issues that you can handle, you don't need to take those issues to your developers. That might introduce trust issues with the development team. Make sure that you're communicating the right information with the right person. Finally, you need to understand your audience. You can have a very technical conversation with developers in a way that you couldn't have with your customer. I'm not saying that you need to dumb things down for your customer. Some customers are technical and they want to have the technical conversation. Just make sure that you understand who your audience is and what information they need and how much detail you should share with them. I found there are two things that can really ruin the idea of managing expectations. We've already talked about assumptions. The other one is scope creep. Scope creep should be negotiated. For example, we would use that conversation from a couple of slides ago that said, well, we could do this, but it would mean that we're going to turn this project in a couple of months later, and it could add another $50,000 to the bill. A different way of negotiating might look like this. Would you rather we cut this part of the project out so that we can put your new specifications in? That's a conversation you would have when the due date or the budget aren't negotiable. When you're having these conversations, try and remove emotion. I know it can be really hard to do that when you're deep into a project already headed one way and then they come back and ask you for more or different things. That can be frustrating, but we don't need to bring emotion into these conversations. Having said that, we do need to make sure that the customer understands the impact of what the scope creep really means. It means less features that they've already specified, or a change in budget or date, or whatever the impact would be based on the amount and type of the scope creep.